joining for us.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Operations Committee meeting of May 2nd. Friday, May 2nd. The only thing harder to predict than human behavior is the floor time in the Vermont Senate. And we again managed to, well, 2 hours anyway. So I appreciate people's patience that have been waiting for us to take up the elections bill. And we have put off, unless somebody has a violent objection, H397, the so-called flood and emergency management bill until next week again. But I want to start off with what we just received. And I believe Jillian has copies of that. This is, I thought, a charter, but technically, I guess it's not a charter. It has to do with annexation. And we're joined by Lisa Hangel from the Vermont House of Representatives, who is going to explain how this happened. And this is H364. Welcome. I think you know everybody, so it's nice to have you with us on Friday.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. For the record, Representative Lisa Hango, representing Franklin 5, and I'm here because this has to do with the village and town of Swanton, and Swanton is in Franklin County. H364, which we understood in House government operations to be a charter change, came to us recently, and not thinking that it had to meet crossover, we sent it over to you all, and it went to Senate Rules, was my understanding. But thank you to those folks on Senate Rules for getting it out really quickly and over here. The Village of Swanton offices have occupied their current location since the early 1980s, and they have since outgrown their space. There's a parcel of unused land across the road that borders the sides of their property that belongs to the town. Both the Village Board of Trustees back in September of 2023 and April of this year, and the Town Select Board in April of this year, have approved the annexation of this property. The village charter requires approval by the legislature to annex the property, which we understand is a little bit unique. Tucker will tell you more about that. So we're asking you today to take this up and approve it, hopefully. The purpose of this annexation is to move the village electric department, which is currently housed in the existing municipal building, to a new complex that will be built across the street. As a result of this move, the village police department will be able to expand its operations in their existing location, which is right now at capacity. A positive outcome of this annexation will be that the village police force has the potential to further expand their services to include contracting with the town to provide public safety coverage, which it has begun to do within the confines of their available space that they have now. The village will hold a bond vote on May 6th, hence the rush to get it to you to request approval from the voters for that construction. And an affirmative vote from you all in the Senate will provide confidence to the voters that the village can move forward with that bond. Your House committee voted 10-0-1, and then a unanimous voice vote on the House floor to pass this. And that is all I have. So
Anybody have questions for Lisa?
You said the vote was 10-0-1 or 10-1-0?
no, it was 10-0-1 in committee. There was an absence that day.
Yeah, my brain kind of matched it all together, and I just wanted to be clear. Awesome.
Thanks for clarifying.
And I think the questions I had, I'll maybe say for Tucker. It seems like the dates of the votes were, in one case, nearly 2 years ago, and I'm just wondering whether there was a more recent vote.
Yes, sorry. There was also a vote in April 2025 by the village legislative body, the trustees, and April of 2025 for the town select board.
So they both met. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I think it started in the village, and then they decided that for whatever reason, they didn't act on the vote, and then brought it up again.
The vote was strongly supported.
It was the legislative body, so I don't know a vote count. from either, but you will hear from the village manager and perhaps the town administrators, so you might ask them what the vote was.
Okay. Thank you, Representative.
You are most welcome.
It's always great to see you.
It's great to see you all as well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Annexation is an interesting topic at this point in our history.
Well, Tucker has some history behind this, I bet,
Oh, I am sure he does.
or uniqueness, explanation of uniqueness.
Yes.
Thank you.
What
Thank
is
you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for
You as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
Tucker, love to have you join us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Legislative Council. I wish that I had some ancient history related to annexation that I could share with all of you, but really I just have a few unique qualities about how annexation operates generally, and then why we're even dealing with H 364. Under the laws governing municipal corporations, any village is capable of annexing territory within town in which the village is situated, provided the property owners consent to the annexation. And if there's agreement by both parties, the village and the properties to be annexed, the annexation can proceed, except for the village of Swanton. The village has a charter, and in section 2, subsection E of the village charter, the General Assembly must concur in the annexation before the annexation can proceed. So the village of Swanton owns in fee simple absolute this property at 124 First Street, which is situated within the town, but not within the boundaries of the village. If they were any other incorporated village in the state, they could simply be both the property owner and the village consenting in the annexation, and the boundaries of the village would shift. But because of the charter, they have to get the consent of the General Assembly. And for a just point on the parliamentary procedure, in the House, typically these sorts of weird municipal corporation bills are treated as charters because they're special acts affecting one municipality. So even though this is not being codified, this will be in the green books just for the village of Swanton. There'll be a nice little note under the chapter heading. And for all purposes, this is in fact a charter. And that is consistent with the practice of the General Assembly for things like the dissolution of fire districts, which you seem to deal with at least once or twice a biennium. You're dissolving fire districts. The Senate does not have a rule that deals with the introduction deadlines for municipal charters. The House has special rules that say that municipal charters may be introduced at any time. So in my experience, it's not just quirky little bills like H 364. It's any municipal charter that isn't passed by crossover the Senate sends to the Rules Committee before it's released. If you'd like, I can walk you through each of the subsections. The first subsection approves the annexation, states the date that the Board of Trustees approved the annexation. Subsection B details a brief history of how the village acquired the property at 124 First Street. Subsection C explains why the bill exists, which is that section 2, subsection E requires the concurrence of the General Assembly. And then subsection D affirmatively approves the alteration of the village boundaries to include this property at 124 First Street. This is set to take effect on passage.
How big is the parcel of land?
I cannot remember off the top of my head. I wish that I could. However, if you go to the House Government Operation Committee's webpage, the village did submit a parcel map for 124 First Street.
Is this the best committee assistant in the world?
I mean,
Yes.
the timing is fantastic. This could just be,
I can look
a magic illusion.
So the red one is the one to be in that.
Yes.
No,
Larry, I'm sorry you're not with us.
it's all mine.
Oh, it's online, Larry.
Jillian is way ahead of us all.
It's rather small.
And is, never mind, I answered my own question. I'm assuming this black dotted line is the current border of the town through the versus the village. I see someone online shaking their head yes. Wonderful. I appreciate Tucker learning that annexation isn't always by force.
Something just to note is that in the House, this went to Ways and Means.
Oh.
There was just the assumption that because property was being annexed, that it would have an impact on grand lists because the village grand list would be growing. And of course, wherever you have a village, you have taxation authority by two municipal corporations on the same property, village tax and town tax. But this is already village property, so I assume they will not be taxing their own office building,
I
but
was just about to ask if the village or the town has to pay property taxes on their own buildings.
no, but it would be interesting if the town were applying property taxes to the village's office buildings, and maybe the folks from the village can clarify that. There are some interesting cases in the past dealing with overlapping municipal boundaries and municipal corporations taxing each other, including some very interesting formulations that were deemed constitutional, and it dealt with taxing another municipal corporation's property based on the number of toilet fixtures in the building.
Was it in Essex?
You know, it might have been.
Thank you, Tucker. So I see we've been joined by, is it Bill? I can't read the bottom of that.
Yes, sir. It's William Sheets, prefer Bill. I'm the Swanton Village Manager.
Okay. Just for purposes of getting to know it, on your screen is Senator Hart representing the Orange County District. And here we have.
Are we going this way?
Sure.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Brian Collmore representing the Rutland District.
Jillian
Tanya Bihovsky, Chittenden Central District.
and Becca White from the Windsor County District.
So welcome, and we've had a run through, I don't know whether you were with us when Representative Hango testified. But I think we sort of understand what is going on, and we'd love to hear if there are any, I guess, I know there's a vote on next Tuesday, May 6th. I don't know how critical it might be for us to act on this today, or whether we could wait until Tuesday to vote it out of committee. I'll take your counsel on that. I mean, it would seem like as long as it would appear that the Senate is going to, of course, we've got to get to the floor after that. So I'm not sure. You tell me, Bill.
I do not believe there is any rush on your end, and it's great to see familiar faces in a different time. I did 30 years with the state police and testified in front of your committee many times, and I was the interim director of the police academy. So I've since returned home as the village manager here in Swanton for the last 2.5 years.
Okay, great. So this seems to be fairly straightforward. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but I think we understand the issue, and I don't know what sort of testimony I was hoping to get Brian Savage on because he's your counterpart, I think, in the town, right?
Yeah, we work together very closely, and I heard the comment of annexation. This is the most collaborative annexation you could ever have. So we currently, the village of Swanton is often thought of as a little small municipality, and we are, but we have 42 full-time employees ranging from electric, hydroelectric, water, wastewater. We're essentially bursting at the seams, which caused us to take advantage of this opportunity of the parcel next door, which is in the town currently. It presents a contiguous property for us to hopefully build our new electric department facility on and move the 20 employees over to that location, freeing up space in our current facility for police expansion and public works expansion. We have a charter that I know was referenced to in the opening comments that allows us to do it in conjunction with the General Assembly. And we have a letter of support on file from the town. And it really seems like everybody, at least in the village and town, is in full agreement and support of this annexation.
Here's an off the wall question. Who plows First Street? The town or the village?
It's a state highway we're
Ah.
required to maintain, but it is village up until just up near the exit, and then it becomes the town.
Okay. I don't think I've ever been involved with an annexation before. Senator Clarkson.
A peaceful one. I've been at birthday parties. We've had some annexations. Young man, you know, annexation. But I would, like to ask, what's the population, between Swanton Village and Swanton Town?
Combined, we're just under 6,000.
And when was the last time have you taken a vote recently to merge? I mean, I asked this as a village resident of the town of Woodstock, and we are always.
Yeah,
Village thing.
I would say that the last non-binding query on the topic was at least a decade ago. I think about 15 years ago.
No
And-
vote to do it again.
That was favorable to it. That was favorable to explore whether, you know, we combined, and there was some exploration of that. And I think it's still the same. It's the same topic. I think the village residents would maybe enjoy the opportunity to combine if we could level out the tax rates, in particular for policing, which is getting extremely expensive. And if you're on the town side, you're very reluctant to do that because your taxes are going to inevitably increase. That's what I hear from the voters.
And that we've actually managed to keep merging those pieces, the town, the police and fire and stuff. But yes, anyway, good luck.
Senator
Thank
Mills?
you.
Oh, I'm just,
Oh,
this whole Swanton conversation is giving me heartburn. And it's not because of Swanton, it's because I live in Essex.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
you had some really ugly merge, don't merge, separate, conversations.
You're having data.
No, this
I
is
think it's,
so much kinder.
yeah, it really is. I think we work very collaboratively together. It's two different things. The village runs the enterprises, and essentially the town runs the regulatory. I think everybody's in agreement. If we did merge, I don't know that there would be a great deal of savings. You know, I've been involved in a lot of mergers, the public safety answering points and the state police, the merger of various offices. This is really no different. I think it would help avoid confusion for certain tasks. For example, somebody walked in a lobby today to want to pay their town taxes. They're in the wrong building. It's confusing for our citizens. But at the same time, I don't know that we would save millions of dollars by doing a merger either.
It would save you auditing dollars.
Yes.
I mean, you know, to have to audit.
Yep. Any other questions from committee members? Senator Hart, have you got a question or you're all set?
I'm all set. I don't have any questions on that.
Okay. If I could suggest, Bill, and you might let Brian know, maybe it's already been done. I understand there are some letters that kind of like say, hey, both sides are in agreement here. That will help who's ever going to do the floor report later.
Yeah, so there is a letter on file from the town that from the select board. For purposes of testimony, I testified to this on the House side, so that you know I'm not freelancing this. We, the Swanton Village trustees, on 2 separate occasions authorized me to explore annexation of 124 First Street. The first time that was on September 11th of 2023. And then because of the fact that we had 2 brand new trustees, they reaffirmed that unanimously for me to seek annexation on April 14th of 2025.
Okay. Senator Bielowski.
Just to the chair's point, could you send the select board letter, and the village vote just to us so we have it for floor report and for our own information?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no more questions for Bill, I'll thank you very much for your time. Hope you have a good rest of Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. My suggestion is we probably, I don't know whether we, I'd sort of like to at least hear from the town.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure.
I was fully prepared to vote it out today, but given Bill's testimony that we don't absolutely positively have to rush this, we probably don't, so. Let's take it up. Maybe put it on the.
I
agenda
feel
for
pretty
Tuesday.
confident where we are. I would even accept written testimony from the town if they, but if they want to come and speak to us, I mean,
Yeah,
I could vote on this today.
I,
But I know you like to hold, I know you will.
no, I really what it comes down to, and it's not that I don't trust anyone, is that I do want to hear from both parties involved because I have some strong feelings about annexation.
okay. So we'll put it on the agenda for Tuesday. And now,
Everybody's fine if they can't come on Tuesday. I'm happy to take written testimony.
okay. Let's move to, H 474, an act related to miscellaneous changes to election law. Chelsea, welcome. Thank you for your patience today. We're going to be joined by, and you can certainly, move
Thank
to the
you.
chair. Chelsea McGuire, who's the, town clerk in Orange, but also is it the executive director, the CEO? How do you reference the, Municipal Clerks Association?
I am the chair of the legislative committee of the Berkeley Board of Trustees.
And earlier, she had sent us, both a pie chart and also just, because I was having trouble with the colors, opening it up large enough to, get an idea, but I believe she also sent, written, testimony on that, and so I'll send it over to you.
Sure. So, the last time I was here, and thank you for bringing me back to talk about this, we had wanted me to go back and poll our members to see where they were at, especially on ranked choice voting and the electronic ballots. So on ranked choice voting, that's specifically what you had in your email, the list. It's a pretty high number, close to 65% of our clerks feel either very or somewhat negative about ranked choice voting in general. And then only less than 16% feel positive about it. There are some that are neutral. A certain number, almost 38%, do think that a study from the Secretary of State's office would be helpful. More than half of our members feel as though they have kind of made up their mind on how they feel about it. Our members, for the most part, tend to stay up to date on current events and things that would impact their office. So I understand that they all would already have their opinions on things like that. The vast majority of them, if ranked choice voting were to be implemented, would want it for the presidential primary only. And then for general concerns, kind of just went through everything.
Just ask a question.
Senator Glass.
So, I know people have opinions about ranked choice voting, but actually has VLCT educated or had an opportunity to educate the clerks about the pluses and minuses of ranked choice voting and what it involves?
VLCT has not.
Okay, because I think a lot of us had opinions about it, and then as we learn more about it, for example, one of the things I'm most concerned about with elections is how contentious they're getting. And I think the thing I love about ranked choice voting is that by everyone courting votes, it is a lot less contentious. You cannot afford to alienate people. And so the plus for me of this study is that you at least can explore it and then people get better educated about it. So I am always concerned by people who haven't had an opportunity to hear as much about it as we've been lucky enough to hear quite a bit about it in this committee. But it's without a study, how do they actually know? So I mean, these people, the clerks are saying they're not interested. They're only 38% are willing to learn more. I mean, that's what that says to me is only 38% of your clerks are willing to be open to having a study done to learn more about ranked choice voting.
So the majority of the concerns are regarding voter confusion and the educational needs that would be needed,
Right.
both for the clerks and the BCAs and for the voters. And then the other concerns were mostly administrative and logistical challenges. Very few of them were due to resistance to change. And I think that's probably why, and no one really had told me, and I can't read their minds, but, I think. I know, I really wish I could. And that's probably why so many of them feel as though a study specifically wouldn't help, is just because they're concerned about how it would be implemented and how to talk to voters about it.
Right. I just would have assumed that a study would take into consideration addressing education to reduce confusion.
Senator Yossi.
When this is not a study, it's actually a report to answer those exact
Yes,
questions.
so that's,
And, you know, it's also, and I don't know if the clerks generally, and I know you can't read their mind or speak for them, are aware of the many studies that have been done that show that, like, it's not that complicated. Voters are not confused. And the city of Burlington actually was a great test study of this, in that they passed it and then had a special election happen before they were able to do any of the voter education that they had planned. And they were able to, we heard from the city clerk of Burlington that it was not that heavy of a lift, and there was not a significant increase in spoiled ballots, even though they were not able to do any voter education because of this. Like, it was like a 2-month turnaround. They passed it, and then they had the special election because someone resigned. So I would hope that by putting that all in a report for people to look at, it would help ease some of those concerns. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I've been pretty obvious all along that I don't favor this direction, but that's fine. I do want to mention that there are 150 clerks in the is it an association? Yeah, and 108 of them responded. So that's a pretty high.
that's right. That's a good,
I was very impressed, yeah.
you've got very engaged clerks.
And technically, it's
Right.
65.9%. So nearly 2/3 are either very negative or somewhat negative. And 15.7 are either somewhat positive or very positive in this particular survey.
So my question is for you is actually, what was the question asked? Are they supportive or not supportive of ranked choice voting, or are they supportive or not supportive of a report about ranked choice voting? Because those are two very different things.
It was ranked choice voting specifically, and then I asked the question about the report separately.
Which is how you got the 38%.
Yes.
And were people opposed to it, or did they just feel like, I don't need it?
Only a few of them really told me why
Okay,
they weren't
that's
that.
fair.
And so they would be the ones with stronger opinions on it.
That's fair.
And that's where you got the confusion responses, you know, that you don't want, that they need more education, or that they don't want their voters confused.
Yes, I had a separate thing, sorry, for people to tell me in general, what do you think about it?
Got it. That is helpful, because and I'm glad you asked both questions, because I think someone's opinion on whether or not they want the information they're concerned about versus whether they presently support ranked choice voting could be really different.
Emma.
I just wanted to share that Chelsea emailed you the full questions and all the responses she got. It is a little hard to read, but just it might help you understand all the different questions. And then they were able to respond. So it's all anonymous, so we don't know which clerk is which.
Yeah. It's an
And-
Excel sheet. So
Yeah, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and she sent that on the 24th at 1:50.
okay.
I can resend it if needed.
Thank
And she did send a really nice, more compartmentalized
Yes.
version of that as what. The thing
What I saw.
Yeah.
Larry, do you have any questions for Chelsea?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay. Anyone else?
I listened to it all and yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, appreciate your patience today.
Thank you.
Earlier today, we did receive a new iteration of the bill. It's a 37-page bill now. This is draft 2.2. And this was sent by Tim Devlin.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody should be able to open that up and follow along. And many of the changes, I think, are in yellow. Yes.
Do I need to get my computer? That I take it we don't have it printed
No,
out.
it's
Well-
printed on your desk. At least it's printed on my desk.
All right. I don't know how you got a copy.
I didn't bother.
Oh, maybe
It's 37 pages.
Oh, I don't. I have no one.
Ask and you
Thank
shall
you,
receive.
darling. And she knows she's coming to us all way too well.
Thank you.
Today. 'Cause I just never,
I think Larry and I are, and Senator White can follow along digitally.
And it's highlighted digitally, so.
you're so cutting. That's what I think. Cutting edge.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Tucker, do you want to take the chair again and kind of, I know Tim can't be here with us today, but
Yeah, you're one section.
I just want to make sure that the changes that we see are okay with everybody here. I also sent you some other concerns with, forgive me, I'm not remembering her name. But it was a rather lengthy email. She was concerned about the PACs and the, do you remember her?
Sharon.
Thank you. So you may not have had a chance today to look at that, but what I'd suggest is maybe over the weekend or the early, because we're going to take this bill up again, is to re-look at her concerns. We've answered a lot of the concerns, I think. I mean, as this came over from the House, it's much different. And a lot of the suggested changes came from clerks and other folks who, have a particular interest. So, as we walk through this, I would ask people to just make sure that what's in yellow is what we wanted to do. I know Chelsea mentioned the, electronic voting, which we have, deleted from the bill. We have already, taken that up. So Tucker, thank you again for joining us, and, let's walk through draft 2.2.
All right, if you have draft 2.2 in front of you, what I'll do is I'll walk you through the highlighted portions that Tim provided. These are the changes that the amendment makes to H 474 as passed by the House. So the first instance that I can point you to is on page 2. Under the reader assistance heading for miscellaneous changes to electronic ballot delivery law, section 6 has been deleted. And section 6 was the report from the Secretary of State concerning electronic ballot.
Say that.
Everybody okay with that? We have Lauren Hibbert in from, she was fine. Well, I don't want to mischaracterize, I don't think she was fine, but she had no objection. Yeah.
Sorry. Is this effectively shutting down the conversation about, or are we all waiting until, it might be interesting, well, are we waiting, we're waiting for cybersecurity to actually be a little better to.
I think that was our concern. Yeah.
I think that's the major concern is that we still aren't there yet. Okay. Just wanted to remind myself because we didn't.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay.
The next instance of amendment to point you to is on page 5 in section 9. There will be a few of these as we look through. This relates to the declaration of write-in candidates and the date and time by which that declaration would have to be made. You'll see that in the highlighted language, subsection A in 17 VSA section 0.370, that you have shifted this to not later than 5 p.m. on the Thursday preceding the primary election, as you received it from the House. And I believe this was 7 p.m. the day of the election.
It was. Everybody okay with that? This again was a request from, as I recall, the town clerk from Lincoln, who asked for our changing that because she felt that it provided them with a full day of
Right.
working to get.
And our elections professionals from the Secretary of State also supported that.
Yes.
I'd like to do some trading with the clerks. You got this, we got the report on ranked choice voting and we're doing trading.
Yes, so if you want to.
I'm trying to figure out where we are. So I was reading,
Page 5.
I was reading the clerk's response and I got
Oh.
sidetracked. Yeah, as you know, I don't support. this.
Correct. I know. You don't think there should be anything.
I do not. Well, that's not true. I think I hear the concern about being able to match names and know which names are which. And therefore I can support a registration that ends on election day.
Okay. Well, hopefully that something you can,
We'll see.
okay, that's fair. Okay, Tucker.
I will quickly note that in section 10, you have the same amendment,
Yes.
updating the And that brings us into section 11. And we're going to move into page 8 within that section. In the subdivision 3C. This was the tallying language that the committee wanted to change. So as it came from the House, this required that the names of persons who have not filed according to the write-in requirements of the bill shall not be listed individually, but instead will be recorded on the tally sheet as a blank vote in aggregate as other write-ins. And the committee's amendment proposes to strike the blank vote language so that it will just be recorded in aggregate as other write-ins.
That was again, as I recall, at the suggestion of the town clerk from Lincoln, who felt that there was some confusion. I'm not sure how she worded it, but she didn't really say, how can you count it as a blank vote and then an other write-in at the same time? And our legal counsel advised us that it didn't really make much difference whether we had it in there or not, so we're taking it out.
And I hope at the time, go back and watch my testimony when I was filling in for Tim on that particular day, that I did note that it might be a good idea to receive testimony from the practitioners in this area to determine whether there's something special about the typo sheets that require these to be listed as blank votes for some reason, but.
Oh,
I
don't like that expert fee.
It would be the clerks, yeah.
Well, we have clerks right here.
They would be the practitioners with the templates.
Maybe we could ask our clerks embodied in one.
It doesn't really make a difference. As long as it's on the tally sheet, so we know that that number matches up with the number from the tabulator, it's cool.
there was something, I'm trying to remember how to phrase it.
Gave people a
That if it goes in as a blank vote, it could change the percentage of the winning candidate, I thought. Because it would increase the need to get to that 50% kind of, I'm not saying it correctly, but I know that that was part of the concern.
For candidates that have to receive a major part of the vote under state law
Yeah.
or provisions of the Constitution. Yes.
Yeah. So this would, I don't know if it solves it, it changes it. I'm fine with taking as a blank vote out.
Under this, these would be counted as votes in aggregate, not as blank votes. So they would count towards the overall count for those offices which are required to receive the major part.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Indeed.
Alrighty. Larry, you could unmute if you'd like, and just in case there's something that you wanted to say, you don't have to go through that mute unmute thing all the time. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
Section 12, same deadline update that we've been covering so far. Under section 13, we're on page 10, under the reader assistance heading for campaign finance. Okay, this is ultimately going to relate to consistency of names leading to how they're presented on the ballot. This amends 17 VSA section 2921 to add the requirement that a candidate's consent, which is filed in accordance with section 2361, shall state the candidate's name the same as it appears on this registration. So this is the campaign finance registration, which will be the source of the individual's name. And I wasn't here for all the testimony, but my understanding is that this form is being chosen because the name is actually typed. But on subsequent forms, including the candidate's consent, it is handwritten.
I believe you are recalling 100% correct. Yeah.
And also,
Yeah, Senator White.
it's a better process for them if they don't,
Copy
not,
and paste.
yeah, exactly. It's like they have a spreadsheet, it sounds like probably gets populated, so
Right.
administratively a little simpler.
And just to remind everybody that everybody has to not only fill out a consent form, which states how you want to be stated, listed on the ballot, but it also, every candidate has to have a finance
Registration.
registration.
Yeah.
So,
And they should match.
and they should match, they need to match.
And so I'm hoping that the consent form will indicate that this must be the exact same form of your name as it will appear on the campaign finance. Because if people don't know, as we talked about a lot, I have a son with the same, well, obviously
Oh, yeah, you're.
her name, but it's Brian J and I'm Brian P. So if he was running and he didn't know any better, he might just put name down. And so I understand where we're trying to get it. I just want to make sure that a candidate would know that in those two places, it has to be the exact same thing.
Who is responsible for actually producing the consent form? Is it the Secretary of State? So then,
yeah.
I think we just need to simply make sure that because they produce both these forms.
Yeah.
And so it would be great to make sure that the Secretary of State knows, we can make sure that they are exactly the same.
Okay.
We will move right along to the end of page 19, beginning of page 20, section 26. These are the audits for the use of both tabulators. As you'll recall, this, as it came from the House, struck the word random in the requirements for the post-election audits. The new language that you'll see is in subdivision 3B. So you have left in the requirement for random post-election audits. You have put random back in.
Yep.
And subdivision B, you've added the following language. The polling places to be audited shall be selected at random by the secretary. Random selection. If the results do not represent a diversity of geographic areas and sizes of polling places, the secretary may again randomly select a portion or all of the polling places to be audited. So it achieves the lottery intention that I think I heard the committee discuss, but also allows for reselection of the lottery if the results don't represent sufficient geographic diversity.
Is it Mr. White?
It is.
Yeah.
Thomas Weiss, resident of Montpelier, for the record. I truly appreciate the making the selection random, which means each polling place has the same chance of being selected. The second sentence, which allows alterations, I'm really concerned about. Those of us who pushed for random selection back when this was first placed into statute 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. If one is selecting for diversity and size and geographic, it's not truly random. And my point is to strike that second sentence and just leave it that they shall be selected randomly by the secretary. The purpose of the random is as a check on mostly the company that programs the memory cards and the vote tabulators. And by giving somebody the authority to cross out the truly random ones and add some additional ones based on some vague unspecified criteria, it reduces the ability of something that's truly random. There was an earlier draft that had targeted, and I appreciate that being removed because if something is targeted, it can also be untargeted. And I see the second sentence as being the same as targeted, untargeted. It allows the secretary to say, I really don't want this one to be audited, and does a reselection.
Okay, so as I remember, what we tried to avoid having happen was, let's say they do 6. I don't know how many audits they do each election. Let's say they do 6.
It's 6 at the moment.
Okay. And 5 of them are all in Chittenden County. I don't know that that's what we want either. And we were trying to figure a way to phrase this so that different portions of the state would be not necessarily equally represented, but at least there would be some, and diversity is a word I don't know how else to say it. It's taken on its own life, I think, as an adjective, but I don't know how else to do it.
I have an idea, the Secretary of State's gonna hate it. And that is that we do 14 audits and there's a random selection from every county.
I was gonna suggest to go to Thomas's concern, which is if the results of a random selection are not in fact, don't represent a diversity or whatever we want to say, that we just run it again as a random, I mean, we just do it again.
So the whole thing gets thrown out and redone.
Yeah.
To answer the 14, right now, the Secretary of State is auditing 6 municipalities, every office on the ballot, not municipalities, polling places. It takes about 3/4 of a day to do that for the 6. They start at about 8 or 9 in the morning and they get done at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So doing 14 would greatly increase the amount of time that it takes to do the audit. The audits have all been done as a one-day exercise from the very beginning. So.
Oh, no, I'm aware more than doubling the number of audits is gonna be a significant amount of more work, but it's the only way I can think that we get geographic diversity and randomness.
I don't see the need for geographic diversity. If the randomness comes up 5 in Chittenden County, those are the 5 that get done. If the randomness comes up that none are in Chittenden County and 3 are in the Northeast Kingdom and 2 are down Bennington Way and 1's in Windsor County, that's okay too.
I hadn't thought of that.
Right, that it's just.
I'm trying to remember and they do make it public when after they've done it. These are the polling places we audited.
Right.
And I'm trying to recall whether, I don't know how they looked in terms of diversity.
I can get you the list because I have it.
Okay.
I just haven't thought about that and I'll get it to you, I guess, Monday.
Or Tuesday.
But because the current Secretary of State has not done random, I guess this was her first audit. So I don't know how random that one is. And I actually haven't checked recently.
Okay.
They have been selected randomly, but I can get you what the.
But you're right, random is just that, random.
Right.
So if they do end up, that just means for that year, they're all.
Right. And
But they haven't tended to be that.
No, they have. In the second, and the same polling places get selected 2 years in a row. Well, that's part of the random as well.
Okay, tell you what, I'm gonna put a big question mark on page 20.
It's all I'm talking about is that second sentence.
Yeah, no, I'm happy
I got
to consider striking it. I agree with you. I think random is random. And if it
So we
turns out,
probably ought to at least understand what we're asking the Secretary of State's office to do. Doesn't mean we have to agree with it.
I think if we strike that sentence, we're asking them to continue to do exactly what we've been telling them to do for the last 20 years.
Which,
so one thing you could do to make a comment is you could ask for 6 different counties to do one at random, one in each county.
I actually don't feel, I don't actually feel strongly. You may recall I was the one that lost my mind that we were getting rid of randoms.
Yes. Well,
And I don't actually feel very strongly that it needs this additional second piece, but then we heard testimony from others and I was trying to compromise by adding this in and then thinking about the counties. So I'm perfectly happy to get rid of the second sentence, but I was trying to compromise.
I'm happy to get rid of the second sentence too.
I'll let Tucker finish the highlighted portion because It occurs to me the other issue that came up was the whole Bennington situation, which would have given the secretary some leeway to say, you know what, maybe we ought to do another one down there, over there or up there.
I'm not certain that that is actually in any of the highlighted language.
No, I don't think it is.
And if it doesn't already exist, you could grant authority for a post-election audit in the case of a contested
Irregularity or-
Yes, I'm sure that there is an appropriate legal term to be applied
Okay.
there. The one thing that I would note about this section that was brought up by Tim during his decision point memo walkthrough was that there's interplay between this section and the rules adopted by the Secretary of State. And the language that is here actually closely reflects what is in the rule. So if you're going to move forward with a different policy choice, I would recommend following up with Tim and the Secretary of State on how the rule is applied. Because there's the way that random is interpreted in the rule may be different from the words that are in this section of law.
Yes, I think you are correct. And I think we've had that conversation with Tim, but I do think we had talked in this committee about creating sort of a separate from this audit process, because right now in this bill, they're asking for permission to do that for Bennington, which makes me think that there isn't a mechanism by which with that irregularity. And I think Senator Clarkson has suggested, what's our out of session legislative body?
Oh, the emergency board.
Yeah, that in an instance where there is an irregularity, the Secretary of State in consultation with the emergency board may.
And of course, you'll want to take a look at the statutes that exist. We're using the term irregularity, but in this case, it was a contested election where there was a basis for contesting, and there are parties that you have assigned and designated by statute that play a role
Yes.
in investigating those contested elections. The Attorney General plays a role there. The courts play.
So the E-board would be a last resort. I mean, you have a whole bunch of other places that are looking at it.
And then, of course, finally, if it's a legislator or a representative or senator that is challenging, the General Assembly plays the final role.
So I think we're sort of talking maybe about different things. So in this bill, and it's going to take me forever to find it, we grant the Secretary of State permission to audit the districts to make sure that everyone's in the district they belong in. And the Secretary of State, in my understanding, can't do that without that permission. And I think we're trying to avoid a situation. I don't know what we're trying to do, actually, never mind.
You might be talking about essentially a study and report that came in H-474. I think it persisted into the version that's in front of you, where the Secretary of State was going to audit any district where there was the same split street apportionment as existed in Bennington 1. And that's not ongoing authority. That is for purposes of a follow-up to the Bennington 1 challenge, looking at that specific districting issue.
Yes, I seem to recall that our House counterparts, when they explained why they were removing random, it had something to do with the Bennington election. And I was deeply uncomfortable removing that across the board. And so I think we had a conversation about trying to create a separate process. And maybe we don't need to. Maybe it's okay if we can't deal with it till we're back in session. I don't know. But we can circle back with
Yes, I'm happy to
because I know
follow
you're
up.
kidding.
So that leads us to, are you okay, Mr. Weiss? You had your hand up there for a second.
I did the conversation warranted my withdrawing my hand, but thank you.
So let's pick up on line 12 of page 20. I think that's where we stopped.
I was ready to skip right ahead.
Oh, well, that's fine too.
Let me go back and see where.
Something about ballot bags and,
Isn't that already current?
This is existing language, so the reason it's highlighted is that
oh, okay.
Tim is just noting for utilities being redesignated to move subdivisions.
Right. But other than that, that's correct.
Okay.
And if we move to page, I believe it's gonna be 29. Yep, got it. Tim has highlighted the opening of section 32. He's actually noting for you that something has been removed here. And this was the section relating to the, I believe, submission of nominating petitions at the local level and the deadline being shifted from 6 weeks before to 5 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So that has been removed based on direction from the committee.
And that was again, just for Chelsea's benefit, at the request of one of the town clerks. I don't remember who it was, but they were like begging to have that extra week.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
But we're reverting back to what is current law,
Six, yeah.
which I also have concern for. So, yay.
The next is on page 33, under the reader assistance heading automatic voter registration. So these are new sections. Section 37, Amendment 17 VSA, Section 2145A. These are the automatic registrations at the DMV. Subsection A, an application for or renewal of a driver's license or non-driver identification card that serves a simultaneous application to register to vote. You are adding a contingency here. If the applicant attests to U.S. citizenship or the department has proof of U.S. citizenship.
Mhm.
And the opt-out language that follows, unless applicant checks the box on the application designating that the applicant declines to use the application as voter registration.
And then current practice.
That's current practice. The only other change to note in here is in subdivision B1D, that the street address that will be used for purposes of the registration is E911 street address. You also, in subdivision F of that same subdivision, added phone number as part of the applicant registration.
How would one know what their E911 street address is?
Because for most people, it's the same as their address.
Not for everyone, though.
So now you have your physical address. It says physical address or mailing address. Because so many people have PO boxes.
True.
So you, at least on the voter registration, this is DMV, which is different, right? Because on the voter registration, it has your mailing address and your physical address, which the physical address, I believe, is meant to capture your E911 address,
So
right?
by default, 2 Main Street is your E911 address?
Yeah.
Well,
I think it depends, and there are distinctions sometimes between, for example, your physical mailing address that the USPS uses under their particular codes, and then, for example, E911 or even address identification for purposes of taxes, which, if you recall from local option tax updates over the last 4 years that have moved within charters in this committee, so all of the agita that arises when the tax department is trying to identify where a sale, internet sale, is taking place, because they often rely on USPS addresses, which are not always completely accurate when they're dealing with, for example, a village tax. So I will get back to you on how E911 addresses marry with physical mailing addresses. I will note that my house, which is at the top of a class 4 road where it turns into a trail, it is completely unapproachable in the middle of the woods. I have an E911 placard that the town drilled into a tree at the end of my driveway. So I am assuming that in many other municipalities,
It's the same.
but this request came from DMV, I assume. We didn't take any testimony on E911 addresses.
I think what we need to know is if that is accurately what should be being used as the applicant's address for purposes of voter registration. So if, I think what
As
we need,
opposed to physical address.
right,
Because
so I do think this matters and we do need to know.
Yeah.
If that's the appropriate.
Okay.
right, so there is a distinction because many villages have like to keep their historic numbers. So in Woodstock, we do not have E911 addresses in the village.
You just don't have them.
We have addresses, but we have the historic addresses. So, which are X number of feet, the E911 ones are very specific to the number of feet or the distance you are from X point. So it's a very exact, addressing system or numbering system.
We need more information.
I will look into this for you all. I do remember during the
I have no idea.
discussion that there were examples that had come up with, I believe, representatives, voter registrations where their mailing addresses, PO box locations were where their candidate forms were being associated with, and they were identified as candidates in the wrong districts at some points. So
So that is why the voter registration form has your mailing address and your physical address. They are two separate things.
I will say, however, that the information in the voter ID checklist is, not always the most helpful, not always complete, not always, so I certainly I understand what they're trying to get at here with having more consistent information. I'm just not convinced this is the right way to do it.
I'll follow on for it, talking about following up. The next instance of amendment is in subdivision D2. It is conforming language related to the attestation of citizenship. And this is in the duty of the DMV to not transmit information to the voter registry if these criteria are not met. Under the reader assistance heading on page 35 for the listing of candidate names on ballots, this amends 17 VSA section 2472 in subdivision B2. The new language states that a candidate's name shall be printed as it appears on the candidate's campaign finance registration, which we paid a brief visit to earlier, with the Secretary of State filed in accordance to section 2921 of this title.
So I have a question that you may not know the answer to, and that is, do you know how many states do not strictly use A to Z alphabetical order for their candidates listing on the ballots?
This conversation has come up many times in the last couple of weeks.
I know, it's like you're bringing it up.
That's particularly
You're a broken record on something.
by
You, V person, you.
legislators whose last names end with V and W and other end of the alphabet letters. This question has come up quite a bit. I wish that my encyclopedic surface knowledge of election law was that deep. I don't know, but I will look up for you what happens in the states. NCSL might already have information.
I might check to NCSL. I know it's at least two, that both of which California and I believe Pennsylvania both do not use our mechanism of alphabetical by surname. But I don't know if there are others, and if there are other mechanisms by which you make the voting process more fair for everyone, regardless of the surname they have.
Two of us on the committee would be fine with the opposite, as long as the first two are beginning to C.
And to go to random. There's always a choice of randomly choosing.
I am advocating for random. Actually, that is what I want.
But it would be interesting to
California does
see
Okay.
what other states.
Yeah.
I don't think I think at this point in the session, it may be a bigger conversation than we're able to take on.
Deal. I even asked the Secretary of State which random method they would prefer.
And what did they
The
say?
California method. Because Pennsylvania does an actual lottery where people have to go in and draw their ballot order.
Well, then they just have to all beat each other.
Whereas California just randomly throws the alphabet in a hat, and then whatever that comes out, that's how it's listed. So if the alphabet this year is Q, L, B, C, Z.
Oh, so then it's not alphabetical within that, it's just a random set of names. So you actually really have to think about who you're voting for.
Yes, it would be better for voters, better
What
for
an idea.
democracy, more fair for the candidates. And the Secretary of State preferred the California method, which is to randomize the letters because they could do that within the computer system and we wouldn't have to draw. So I am here to propose the California method of alphabetization. of
This
candidates.
committee is divided.
And you'll note where the divide lands too. I also provided you information that shows quite clearly that there is a significant advantage to being higher on
I
that.
agree.
Senator White.
I've made this point many times. My only question would be, if we were to randomize it on the ballot, is it that every town would have the same random order? So
Would be the
if
secretary
we were
of
in Hartford, we would be the same one as if we were in Springfield, it would be the same order. Okay.
I think we also heard that there's one state, it might be New Jersey, that uses election, they fill them out electronically, so every ballot's different.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Cause I do appreciate, when I'm looking at a ballot, I really appreciate when people like make those fake mock ballots and then they circle people and it's like, okay, now I know who I'm thinking about.
But yes, what I was proposing in the California model, the randomized order would be the same
In
across
every
the state.
I mean, Counselor Anderson, noting he's an A. Counselor Anderson, was this discussed at all in the House?
No, because it's not part of H4. It has only been raised in this committee, yes. I am quite certain that the origination point for all of this happened here in this room.
Okay, so, okay.
If I hear random alphabetical order, I might give you write-in candidates.
I think that it's worth.
Are you willing to
I'd like to.
deal on other stuff?
Let's negotiate. Hey, we're already in negotiation with the clerks. On the right choice.
Okay.
Do I hear 15? Right, exactly.
Okay,
You're right at the end.
We are.
Oh, thank goodness.
So you're moving through page 36.
yeah,
Right.
You have in section 39, and amendment to 17 VSA, section 2361. These are a set of conforming amendments both for the way that a candidate's name appears, but also the order in which the forms are submitted and how they reflect each other. So first, in subdivision 4, at the top, page 37, a candidate's name shall appear the same as it does in the candidate's campaign finance registration with the Secretary of State. This is for their consent form. And in subdivision C2, the requirement that a candidate, prior to filing the consent form, shall register campaign finance information with the Secretary of State. So taken in total, all of the amendments that you've looked at requires the campaign finance registration to be submitted first. The name that is used must then be the name that is used in the consent candidacy, which is then the name that is used on
The ballot. And finally, we will have that line. That's great.
I'm trying to recall on the campaign finance form, maybe it's just because I never chose to do it. Our nicknames, can you put a nickname in on those?
That's mentioned on this previous.
Here, but I'm intrigued about and the provision that you must have used it for at least 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know where.
Yes, it can't be a new nickname.
So I can't, my brother who's gone by Nicholas his whole life, if he decides 2 years before running, that actually, you know what, I want people to call me Nick. Or maybe I interviewed for a job and they just started calling me Nick.
But that's current law.
I know, it's weird. And who's checking? Who's checking to see if they've gone by that for at least 3 years?
the Secretary of State received an affidavit from the candidate.
Yeah.
That is their nickname and they've gone by it for at least 3 years.
That's
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I feel like
This
this,
is weird.
well, I think it's reasonable because I do appreciate that you could use it negatively. Like I could become Rebecca Freedom White.
You actually can't, and that is covered later. A nickname that constitutes a
That's
slogan or
exactly-
otherwise indicates. No, mine changed with the 3 years.
Yeah, but I think the point is that if I were to do that, to change the way I read that section, if I were to change and have a nickname that is somehow, I mean, I think it just sets it up so there's a better standard for saying, okay, maybe freedom doesn't indicate a political, maybe that was my nickname. And if people said you've been using freedom since you were a kid, just for some
But
random
you still wouldn't
reason.
be able to use it because it would fall under the second sentence. There's two pieces to this. The first
Yeah,
piece
and I'm
is-
saying that having it be the 3 years preceding makes it much easier to point to that.
What
To
if-
call out the unlikeliness of that not being a political, to not have it be something that is to affiliate you with a successful candidacy on the ballot to promote that. If you have been known as Coach Christie for a much longer period of time, I'm going to assume that that is more likely not having been chosen because that's a social good that people like coaches and it was used on the ballot. So I don't know, I think it strengthens the second part of it. Is what my point.
think even if you've used Rebecca Freedom White for 20 years, the
It's still
argument
gonna
could be made that it is actually political and you can't use it.
I would agree with that potentially.
I think there's places where the 3 years is problematic. What if I'm considering transitioning my gender and I'm just trying something out and I haven't changed my name yet? And so I'm like, oh, I'm Nikki. So I have to wait 3 years to run for office?
With that nickname.
You just
But if you changed your name.
I'm aware that you changed your name.
An interesting analysis of this that Edge Council has thrown around a couple times is what if your nickname is Doc or Doc? Then does that subvert the subdivisions that follow that prevent you from using your professional title?
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not a doctor.
I brought up the case of the very famous Dr. Bliss, who killed the president, and his first name was Doctor, his nickname was Doc, and he was in fact a medical doctor. How would he run on the ballot?
True.
He'd probably still be Dr. Bliss, and everyone would know that he's a doctor anyway.
I don't know anyone that has a 2-word nickname.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Dr.
Well, it says 1 or 2 words. And I'm thinking, geez.
Ignorance and bliss.
I don't have an issue with the ban on,
Well, it's current law, so
This is all current law.
we're just.
just because there's other stuff in here that's current law that I have a problem with,
Okay.
like having to buy your way onto the presidential ballot. Just because it's current law and we currently do it, doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Didn't say it was right. just-
And the only new thing here is moving in B from a
Shall.
nickname may to a shall.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that change, so. And I think 3 years, if you're using a nickname, the whole point of that is you're trying to remind voters that that's who you are, and they may know you only as BC. But in fact, now that you're grown up, you want to be on the ballot with Brian Palmer, but you're also known to a ton of people as BC.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. I mean, you have to, the whole point is recognition, I think.
Right, but if you remove that, and someone had only been Doc for 2 years and they decide they want to go by their nickname, the only person they're hurting it is themselves if people don't actually know them as that.
Well,
Is Becca a nickname?
Becca is a nickname.
Okay, but
I go by Becca White on the ballot.
yeah,
use it for
Yeah.
nickname. And you use your nickname.
yeah, no, I'm just.
Yeah, I don't actually know. I feel like I've normally just I've had it be italics in between.
And
So
coach has it.
Yeah, that's how it's listed.
So, yeah. And
I don't know where I put that. I feel like I've always asked. Like there's always a separate line that I put it on, but I wouldn't need to.
But in the campaign finance, that's where it would have to go if we're gonna adopt this provision.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I would be curious to know how many legislators use a nickname on the ballot. It would be kind of fun. Because it's a lot that we have 2 out of.
Bernie.
Woodman.
Yeah, Bernie uses Bernie.
Well, this is a very intriguing discussion, but I personally have no changes. I like how.
I have no change.
I feel that on up to page 37, section 40, I'm good.
But we have questions on the randomness of the name
Yeah.
selection. We do have questions.
And the E91 address.
Yes.
And the E9 vote.
So you give me some homework to bring to Tim. The one thing that both Tim and I wanted to raise was that the committee had not yet revisited, the decision point on the local appointed officers and the 1 year statutory term and whether that should be removed to establish the presumption that those are at will removal of those officers.
I would support that and or by contract, because many people who were hired once they're not elected are hired on a contractual basis. We just had Nicholas here who had just renewed his 5-year contract. So I would propose that we either use by contract or what was the other one?
At will.
At will.
I think the challenge here, and I still didn't really sufficiently get an answer, is the differences between an appointment and a hiring process. So an appointee is not the same as an employee.
That is true. That is true.
That is correct. The appointee is not the same as.
And I still don't sufficiently understand the differences.
That's a good question because appointees, one assumes, have the same benefits, pay scale, the whole thing.
Not necessarily.
So maybe we could ask a little homework on the difference between appointed and.
I tried to get that.
There are appointed clerks whose pay and salary are essentially tied directly to the fees that the town clerk's office collects. So you have variations between appointed offices that might not exist at the local level for employees.
Not that we don't need another provision, but I've been contacted by 2 of the senators actually, and I think one that sits here about the commingling of ballots.
Mhm.
And I got language that I think did I send that to you or Tim? I can't remember.
Tim,
So Westford, Essex and Essex Junction have right now the requirement that they commingle. If it's a school district vote, not
yes.
talking about anything else. And they're requesting that it not be mandatory for them to do that, that each town should count and announce the vote. And I don't know whether this committee has any appetite to go back to that or not.
I want to hear, we've talked about this and I still want to hear from the school boards and the folks that did
Yeah.
why do we commingle? I don't want to undo something without understanding why we did it.
We've invited the school boards people in and they haven't responded. I don't know why not.
The school board sues here all the time.
Well,
You mean the association? Sue Sidlowski.
we've asked specifically to have them come in and tell us more about why we made that decision. It's been a while. It's been
Yeah.
2019. I don't know what day it was, but and it's come up apparently enough that I'd like to say it was an option for the towns to do it one way or the other, but I'd be willing to at least entertain testimony that we don't make them do it.
My recollection from
You
some of
see
the
that.
temporary authority under COVID is that it is a mandate that ballots be commingled.
Oh, it is.
At that time, I believe that the temporary authority suspended the required commingling to prevent the kind of requiring the clerks to travel town to town to collect the ballots, instead allow the counting to be done on a town by town basis with the results reported to the central district office. And my only knowledge or recollection of this area is that commingling was so that the results of the election wouldn't be maybe unfairly applied to an individual municipality that's a member of the district.
And yet,
And yet,
in every primary and general election, that's exactly what we do.
I think.
White River Junction, Hartford, Heartland, all have individual vote tallies. You can say, boy, those people in Heartland don't like you. I mean, I don't understand what the difference is.
I think there's a fundamental difference between voting for an individual person and voting to say, raise the property taxes of the neighboring town or not raise the property tax. Like there's so much, I do actually think there's something different.
Really? I think by voting for some of us,
You're
think
sending your name.
you have similar
Yeah.
value and impact on that voter's life. And I mean, we make decisions that have just as big impacts as a tax.
But someone doesn't necessarily know every decision we're going to make unless they have an ability to predict the future that I don't. Whereas when you vote on a school budget, you have a very clear understanding of if A, then B.
I guess I disagree with the idea that it's bad to know that information in general. I understand that maybe if you're a town that votes down your school budget and you don't want to have it be that the town that's lower in property value is always the town that's voting down. And
That is
you know
usually what
that-
happens.
Yes, I can understand maybe that angle, but I also think that is good information to know. Like that, I don't.
Fahrenheit, we're all,
Yeah,
we
I
always
understand.
know that Fahrenheit. would-
The
Well,
only,
Oh, so sorry, go ahead. Oh, no, you're fine.
the only other point I would make is that my understanding of why the change is being asked for is because commingling is a process. And the additional point that I heard that I felt was most well made was when you commingle, if there is an error in a specific community, it's much harder to catch. Or it could be harder to, once you've commingled, to find that out. And I think that that's a fair point. But I hear what you're saying, yeah.
I would not want to make a change without understanding why we made the change in this direction in the first place. Like, I feel like if we're going to change what is current law without any information as to why it's current law, that doesn't feel responsible to me. The other aspect I would certainly throw into this is we're about to completely change how school budgets are done and how school voting is done. And so maybe we can just do school election changes all at once.
I would propose that we do that.
Hmm.
I mean, you just.
So let's have the school board or the,
Susan, yeah, let's get to.
all right, bring me into and figure out, yes, I'm first.
So as we're talking about things that we're still needing to address to land before we are ready to vote this out, I have voiced interest in hearing about S9.
Yeah, I know, like, if we never went on the floor, we'd already have taken it up a couple of times, but
Oh, right.
that's impossible. That's exactly why. It just didn't happen because of timing. It's on the agenda for next week.
And we have the witness. I mean, we have the presenter, the proposer.
I don't have anywhere else to be, generally speaking.
So next week.
Oh.
Okay.
Is there
Okay.
anything in your bill that we haven't addressed?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff in my bill we haven't addressed. I would say
Or perhaps
probably
addressed in the past,
99% of my bill is not addressed in this bill.
but that we have perhaps addressed.
That is perhaps been addressed in past things.
But I would just really love to get it.
What I
We
do
will-
want to say to you, and I've already told Senator Hardy, because I know you also brought up that Senator Hardy has S86 on the wall.
Yes.
All of S86 is actually in S98.
Yeah.
So by going through S98.
That's, I think I knew that, which is why I was pressing for S9.
Yeah, you had initially brought both.
Yeah,
and
I
I just- yeah. But S86 is in S98, so we'll go through 86 by going through 98.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And we'll do that
Share
next
that
week.
with me before.
Well, maybe I can't remember who I shared what with.
It's okay. Not bad to repeat. And it's, yeah. Thank you.
So, unless somebody has something else. Senator Hart, are you, happy? How are you feeling, by the way?
Nice.
Okay.
Well, thank you for a good week.
No, thank you. You guys were.
Yeah, I'm feeling okay.
Very-
Well,